Okay, so what is an entrepreneur, really? I mean, do you have what it takes to become an entrepreneur? Well, you're about to find out. Let's first talk about the definition of an entrepreneur, okay? Now, the entrepreneur definition comes from an old French word called entreprendre, which means to undertake or to start something. In Webster's dictionary, it's defined the concept of someone who organizes, manages, and assumes the risks of taking on a business or enterprise. They will invest in a business model that may or may not bring a profit. Entrepreneurship, by definition, takes skills and a lot of risks. I believe it's the single most idealism in the United States, and I believe that's what it was founded on. You know, immigrants from all over the world were coming over here to create wealth using their skills that they've learned in their home countries. Many small business owners, they have taken on a business in the hopes of living and doing something that they really enjoy and hoping to make a profit. Some of those entrepreneurs will also get involved in other ventures as well to increase their potential, making larger profits and having more avenues of income. If someone is involved in a lot of different ventures at the same time, we usually call them entrepreneurs because they're taking on so many different opportunities versus a small business owner that focuses on one form of revenue. Let's say a store owner or a baker or a restaurateur versus a real estate investor or a startup investor. They're looking at all different sorts of ventures versus just opening up a bakery and, selling cakes and pies and bread. So those are just different categories of entrepreneurs. It's not to say one's better than the other. It's just that those all fall under one category under entrepreneur. It's the essence of capitalism. Some people hate capitalism because of what it stands for and the effects that it causes on the environment or the culture. But deep down inside, most people want to become independent from working a job. To me, the definition of entrepreneurship is freedom. Freedom to believe, freedom to create wealth, to be able to act on something as you see an opportunity, to fill a need while making money in the process. Entrepreneurs look for problems because they have the opportunity to solve those problems. And when you have the solution to fulfill those problems, you're going to generate an income. For example, the birthplace of the cell phone started because the executives wanted to stay in touch with their clients and they wanted to serve them quicker on the go. Plus, they also wanted to get their clients' business and contract, so they found it cumbersome to, pull over and to use a payphone. Back then, they had beepers at the time. And I remember having a beeper and pulling over to find a phone booth, which were being outdated at the time too. So a guy named Marty Cooper came up with a way to solve that problem when he was working for Motorola. He invented the mobile phone. And in the 80s, if you remember, they were big and bulky. They were very expensive. In fact, they were about $4,000 to buy one, plus $10 a minute or something like that. So nowadays that's way outlandish, but that's when it first started. You had to be a high-paying executive to make that type of money to buy a cell phone back then. But the point is, there was a need, and one man had the idea to fulfill it. So take a look at these stats. These are the number of establishments less than 1 year old from March 94 to 2010. As you can see, it started growing from 94 up to about 2000. And then we had that crash, that dot-com bubble that bursted. Then they went down for a little while. And then 2004, it started to increase again. A lot of people were getting into the marketplace. And over the years, when we had that crash in '07, things started to decline rapidly. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. You can also take a look at the politics and the economics at those times too. Here's another statistic that I wanted to show you about new businesses and unemployment. If you noticed, the more new businesses that came on board, the less unemployment there was in the country. And the less new businesses that were coming on board, the more unemployment was going up, as you can see from this chart. I got this from libertyworks.com, and they got the statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, that's very interesting because, new businesses equal a low unemployment rate because they need employees to run their businesses, to help them run their businesses. So that's an interesting factor right there. Here's a chart of the different statistics of startup businesses that have failed by different industries. For example, information, 37%, and finance and insurance and real estate is almost 60% of those that have failed within the fourth year, within the first year. So it's very observing that you want to take a look at this. You can go over to statisticbrain.com/startup failure by industry. This is very good outlook on what type of businesses were surviving, what have more chance of failing, okay? And obviously in the finance, insurance, and real estate, that's a higher failure rate than someone selling information and research. Okay, so let's talk about the 7 characteristics of an entrepreneur. And we're going to get started with that. Number 1, they're risk takers. They like to take a leap of faith. When I left my hometown to come down here at the beach, I packed everything I owned into my Subaru GL10 Turbo and took off 777 miles away from home without looking back. And that's part of my characteristics that I have, being a part of me, is to take the risk to see what's on the other side. So a lot of entrepreneurs will take that risk, and they'll risk their savings, they'll risk their retirement funds to take the plunge. Number 2 is freedom. A lot of entrepreneurs, they don't want to have a boss. They want to be free to act, free to move, and make their own hours, okay? A lot of this is my number 1 characteristic that I believe that an entrepreneur has, is the just that sense of freedom, to get up when you want to get up and start working when you want to work. For example, I don't mind sleeping in to about 7 to 7:30, getting my coffee, and then probably starting work about 9 o'clock, and then working throughout the day, taking a break when I want to take a break, and then also working at night. I don't have a problem working late into the evening, doing what I do. But the biggest thing is not having a boss telling me what to do all the time. However, I have to say this with a fine line, that you're always going to have a boss, and the boss is your customer, your clients, and the regulators of the state and the federal government too. So it is a kind of a myth, but you really don't have a boss looking over your shoulder and criticizing every little thing that you're doing on the job. Number 3 is they're an independent, okay? That's one of the great characteristics of an entrepreneur, is they like to work independently. They don't work well with others, They may do it for a time. Maybe you're working with coworkers and they don't want to do the job, and that as a team that you're responsible, and if it doesn't get done, the whole team is going to get yelled at and perks are going to be taken away. I've seen this done in my own life. that you really want to work independently. You can do a better job, and if somebody would just let you be and do what you want to do, how you want to do it, as long as the job gets done. So a lot of entrepreneurs are very independent when it comes to working. Number 4 is leadership. They have leadership skills, they have leadership traits. More likely, they're a type A personality. They don't have time for incompetence. They're very passionate at what they do, and they're very task oriented. Okay, leadership, they're able to talk to their managers, talk to their mid-level managers and say, look, this is where we're going, and this is what you need to do to make that happen. And a lot of times, they hate incompetence. I know I'm one of those, that if people are getting paid to do something, they should know their job inside and out. And they should not always be asking the question, well, how do I do this? And how they need to figure it out. And that's part of the character trait of an entrepreneur, is they don't have time to put up with people that don't have the competence to do their own job. Okay. Number 5 is they're organized. They lay out their priorities and their daily tasks, even weekly and monthly, and even annually and yearly. Now, so one of the characteristics of being organized for an entrepreneur is very, very beneficial for them in their business. Okay, they really have to sort out and prioritize what's most important. Okay. For example, in an online business, what's the most important thing that people need? They need a website. If you're just getting started online, you have to create content. That's one of your priorities. That's one of your top priorities. And then you have to get traffic to that content and start sharing that. Okay, so there's a lot of different things that you can do to organize your online business if you're going to get into that, if you're looking into doing that route. And priorities are very important when it comes to organization. Also, number 6 is they're visionaries. They will draw out a vision and a plan for others to follow. A lot of times I've heard the term vision casting, and that is casting this vision for their company, for their employees and their managers. And they will come out with a plan. They'll give you the vision. This is what I want to do. And a lot of times they'll have a plan already in place on how they want to have that accomplished. Now, other times they'll have the vision out there, and then they'll have other people alongside of them that they know and trust, that they'll ask them for help, saying, how can we get this vision off the ground? What kind of groundwork, what kind of plans do we need to see this vision come to pass? So, number 6, they're visionaries. Number 7, they're very compulsive. Now, this goes back to, type A personality. They're very determined, they're very habitual, and they're very obsessive about their business. A lot of entrepreneurs, they've started out, in their spare bedrooms. Then they moved, they started to grow. They started to get more people involved. And the more people involved, the more demand. And the more compulsive they get, the more determined they are to win. And the more obsessive they can be. Which, a lot of entrepreneurs, to be honest with you, if they don't have a lot of people skills, they can be very, very cranky to get what they want. Okay. Here's a chart that I came across over at the Harvard Business Review, and it's the different character traits. What they did with this survey, they took a control group of 17,000 people, serial entrepreneurs, and they tested the different surveys, asking them different questions on where they fit their best strengths and weaknesses. I thought this was interesting because they were high averages on persuasion, leadership, personal accountability, goal oriented. And if you notice, we just talked about this, the interpersonal skills were very low. Okay. And what I thought was interesting about this chart in this case study was the low amount of problem solving. Because I always thought that entrepreneurs, including myself, was good at problem solving, especially you have this vision. How are you going to make this thing accomplished? How are you going to get your product out there and things like that? Or if somebody else was having a problem, analyzing their problems and giving them some solutions. So I was kind of shocked by that. Another thing that I was surprised about was the lack of empathy that they have for other people, whether it's their workers underneath them, their managers, or even the customer themselves. They're just so focused on their goals and meeting those goals that they have little empathy and little time to even think about that. Okay, so let's start asking you some questions to find out if you really want to become an entrepreneur. And these are the questions that I came across because, it's something that I've learned over the years, okay, that you definitely need to know this, okay? Number one, do you have a product that will meet mass demand, okay? For example, mops that will reach every household in America and around the world? Or do you have something that's going to focus on a specific niche, a specific target market? Now, I just came back from an expo, an invention expo, where they had all these inventors there up in Pittsburgh. And a lot of those products only met a certain few sections of people. So they didn't reach the mass markets. So that's something you definitely want to get into. Now, we understand that niche markets do work, but that niche market has to be like a massive market. For example, the weight loss is a niche market, but it's a massive market, okay? You see what I mean? So you definitely want to have a product that meets mass demand. Also, can you provide a unique service to solve a problem? Now, what are the problems that you can solve offering a service? Can you save someone some money somewhere? Can you offer your consulting? Can you consult with people to show them how to, eradicate their expenses? Can you, provide a service like a lawn care service where people don't want to get out in the heat and mow their lawn, and you can provide that service for them? The majority of people that start out as entrepreneurs, they start providing services. Okay, it's very difficult to come up with a product because you have a lot of different patents that you have to overcome. The cost of creating a product is astronomical if you're going on a shoestring budget. So services usually are the top priority, especially if you're doing this online. Number three, are you making money now doing your idea? Okay, let's say you have an idea that you've been kicking around. You've been asking your friends, family, co-workers if they would pay for your idea, okay? And are you making money at it now? A lot of entrepreneurs, they start out part-time. This is something they do on the side, maybe late at night, burning the midnight oil, and, coming up with a service, something that they can do while they're, working at their full-time job. It's very important that you're making money at this right now before you venture out making no money at all. Can you support yourself and your family each month? Okay, now this was different for me. When I was working at corporate full-time, on the side I was selling gift items and things like that. And I was not making enough money for my spouse and I. But I also knew that I wasn't giving it full time, okay? So eventually you have to come to a place where you can absolutely know without a shadow of a doubt that you can support yourself and your family each month. Number 5, do you know enough about your market to take that leap? Do you know about your competition? Okay, this is very vital to know before you go out there and leaping. When I went to this inventors expo up in Pittsburgh, I talked to a lot of inventors, and the only thing they focused on was their product. They might have did a little bit of research on their market, but they did not do a lot. They just saw a problem, and they came up with a product to solve that problem. It's very touchy, especially creating a product, whether or not, is somebody else out there doing it? Are they successful at it? Do you find, that your competition is just blowing it out of the water with your market or your service that you want to do? So all these things are available to you online. Okay, there's so much information that you could find out about your competition, about your market, and things like that. But you definitely want to find out about that. Number 6, how long have you been working on your product or your service? Are you able to master your skill? Okay. This is important because, before I took the leap of leaving corporate America, I gave it about 2 to 3 years of working part-time on the side before I took the leap of faith of going full-time in it. Okay, so you definitely want to have experience part-time before you take that leap. Also, do you have spouse support? Okay, this is very important too, because otherwise you'll create animosity in the household. If you're not married and you're single, this is, you don't have to worry about this. But you got to ask yourself, you got to ask your spouse, do you have her support, her or his support to go off on your own to do this? If your spouse is making enough money to do it, then, that's great. That's what happened in my case. I was making some money part-time, but it wasn't enough to support both of us. And because we did not have children at the time and our expenses were low, she went ahead and supported my decision to leave corporate America. And let me tell you, that's a big talk, especially if you feel that you have a secure job, even though there are no secure jobs. But you got to have your spousal support. Also, do you have to have an exit strategy? Now, what I mean by this is, let's say you go and you take the leap of faith and you're going to go ahead and start out being an entrepreneur, and you're starting out a shop, you're creating a service. What's your exit strategy if it doesn't work out in a year or 2 years? Sometimes there's business owners, now I've seen this time and time again, on Restaurant Impossible or Bar Rescue. If you ever watch those shows, you see that these business owners, these restaurateurs, they are in business, but they're not making any money. So they're actually going to a business. Their debt is way overhead, and they're not making any money. They can't even collect a paycheck. They're just there for the 1 or 2 customers there. So you have to have an exit strategy. Are you going to be able to sell this when you're done? If it doesn't work out, how are you going to pay those loans off? How are you going to pay off your debts? These are all the different things that you want to learn about. Okay, so these are the questions that you want to ask yourself before diving into the entrepreneur experience. Okay, these are things that I wish I've looked into. But a lot of times I just ran by the seat of my pants and said, this is a good idea. Let's go for it and let's make something happen. Well, after a year or 2 into it, I'm like, okay, how do I get out? Because it's not working out and I'm just spinning my wheels. So So that's about it. Ask yourself these top questions these are serious life-changing questions that you have to ask yourself before taking that leap of faith and becoming an entrepreneur. Anyway, there'll be more stories and more, teachings on this, more to come over the next 16 weeks. But anyway, if you want more information, check out the Get a Clue Classroom. Register for free. And when you do that, you're going to have access to my Passion to Profits course. Okay. And that's some of my journey, what I went through, and how to turn your passions into profits. So check that out over at thegetaclueclassroom.com. And thanks again for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.